The wind howled through the trees, biting the skin, and the sky above was a blanket of endless night. In the heart of the harsh, frozen land, the people gathered around crackling fires, their faces illuminated by the flickering light as they whispered in hushed tones. Outside, the world was dark, still, and cold. But in their hearts, there was a flicker of hope. The longest night was here. And with it came the promise of a new dawn. For centuries, the Viking people had watched the sky change. The days grew shorter, the nights longer, until the world seemed to slip into endless darkness. It was a time of hardship, of struggle against the bitter cold, when the earth lay dormant and survival itself became a daily battle. But in the heart of this darkness, something miraculous happened. The sun began to return. Yule, the winter festival, was the Viking way of celebrating this return. It was not just a simple feast or holiday, it was a powerful, ancient acknowledgement that light and life were not lost forever. The people had witnessed the sun's slow decline, and they had learned to fear its absence. But they also knew that from the darkest moment, the sun would rise again. As the wind howled outside their wooden longhouses, the Vikings would come together to light fires, dance, and sing songs that spoke of hope and renewal. It was a festival that stretched back to the ancient roots of their beliefs, even before the gods they worshipped in the sagas. The Yule celebration was deeply tied to the changing seasons, a reminder that nature was as much a part of them as their blood, their bones. For the Vikings, the Yule season was a time when the world seemed to hold its breath. It was a time when they could feel the weight of the earth shift, as if the very axis of their lives was turning, moving from one phase to the next. The Yule festival wasn't just a celebration of the return of light, it was a marking of the cosmic dance that had been happening since the beginning of time. Each year, the earth tilted closer to the sun again, and the Vikings celebrated the sun's victory over the darkness, even as it barely touched the horizon. But the sun was not the only figure in this ancient festival. In the shadows of the deep winter night, there was a creature that watched over the land, an ancient spirit that held the balance between light and dark. This spirit was the Yule Goat. The Yule Goat's origins were not entirely clear, even in the Viking Age. Some whispered that it was a creature that came with the darkness, a figure of mystery and mischief. Others believed it was a protector, a symbol of the harvest and of fertility, guarding the homes of those who honored the old gods. The Yule Goat had long been linked with the god Thor, whose chariot was drawn by two goats, Tangrisnir and Tangjastr. It was said that these goats would pull Thor through the heavens during great storms, their hooves striking the clouds and shaking the earth. But the Yule Goat was more than just a connection to Thor. It was an embodiment of the ancient forces that shaped the world. The sun's return wasn't just a scientific fact, it was a spiritual event. The Yule Goat, in its many forms, was a reminder of the promise that the light would always return, even in the darkest of times. In the stillness of the cold night, families would gather to honor the Yule Goat. They believed that it was a creature that came down from the mountains, moving through the forests to visit each household. The Yule Goat would knock on doors and leave gifts behind, a silent reminder that no one was forgotten in the harsh winter months. The goat's visit wasn't always peaceful, though. There were stories of the Yule Goat's mischievous side, of the pranks it would play on those who had not been kind, and the misfortunes that could befall those who ignored the spirit of the season. For the Vikings, the return of the sun wasn't just about survival, it was about rebirth. It was about finding hope in the midst of darkness. And the Yule Goat stood as a testament to this belief, a figure both feared and revered, whose very presence signaled that the cycle of the seasons was eternal. The goat was more than a spirit of celebration, it was a force of nature, a symbol of both protection and challenge. Those who honored it knew that their relationship with the earth, with the gods, and with each other was one of constant renewal. It was a delicate balance, one that could be lost if not cared for, one that could be restored with reverence and respect. The Yule Goat's place in the Vikings' hearts was as crucial as the sun itself. It wasn't simply a figure in folklore, it was a reminder of what could be, even when the world seemed at its coldest. And the Vikings, with their fierce love for the land and their unyielding strength, would never allow the darkness to claim them for good. The Yule Goat was a reflection of that resilience, a reminder that even in the longest, darkest night, the sun would rise once more. And so, they celebrated, and they sang, and they honored the goat, knowing that their very survival depended on it. In those long, cold nights, as the fires burned low and the feasts began, the Yule Goat was never far from their thoughts. It was the embodiment of everything they had fought for, everything they had endured. It was the keeper of their hopes, their dreams, and their future. The sun would rise, and with it, the promise of another season, another year, another chance to begin again. And the Yule Goat would be there, standing in the shadows, waiting to remind them that even in the coldest, darkest winters, there was always the possibility of a new dawn. The wind howled through the trees, the smell of snow thick in the air. It was the dead of winter, the longest night of the year. In the darkness of the frozen land, the flicker of firelight cast shadows on the walls of longhouses, and a strange feeling of anticipation hung in the air. It was said that on this night, when the world seemed to hold its breath, a creature walked the earth. A creature who carried the power of both light and shadow, mischief and protection, the Yule Goat. The first mention of the Yule Goat is lost to time, but it is woven through the ancient sagas and songs of the Norse. To the Vikings, it was not just a figure of celebration, but a symbol of something far older, far more primal. In the oldest texts, the Yule Goat was connected to the gods themselves, most notably, Thor. Thor, the mighty god of thunder, was known for his strength and for the chariot he rode across the skies. But what made his chariot truly legendary were the two goats that pulled it, Tangrisnir and Tangjastra. These goats were more than simple creatures. They were alive with magic, imbued with the power of the storm and the strength of the earth itself. When Thor would ride across the sky, his goats would race through the heavens, their hooves striking the clouds and shaking the earth beneath them. The Yule Goat shared a strange, powerful connection with these animals. Some believed that the Yule Goat was a form of these very goats, transformed into a creature that roamed the earth during the darkest days of winter. The sight of the Yule Goat was a reminder of Thor's power, of the wild, untamed forces of nature that could both destroy and protect. And as the Yule Goat's shadow fell across the land, people would leave offerings to ensure the coming year would be filled with good fortune and plenty. But the Yule Goat was not simply a symbol of Thor's might. It was also a figure of mischief, a trickster that could bring both joy and trouble. In the sagas, the Yule Goat was known to play pranks on those who did not respect the season, those who took the gods and the traditions too lightly. It would visit homes in the dead of night, sneaking into longhouses, startling the people inside, and sometimes leaving behind little gifts, sometimes causing chaos in its wake. One tale tells of a Yule Goat that crept into a farmstead and overturned barrels of mead, scattering it across the floor. The people of the house woke to find the mess and no sign of the creature, only the smell of sweet drink in the air and the sound of hooves retreating into the distance. Another story speaks of a Yule Goat who would sneak into the homes of the misbehaving children, leaving behind lumps of coal instead of gifts, a reminder to be good and honor the old ways. But the Yule Goat was not only a bringer of chaos. It was also a figure of protection. It was said that the Yule Goat would watch over the land, ensuring that the harvest would be plentiful and the people safe. In some areas, people would build small goats out of straw or wood, placing them in their homes or at the edges of their fields. These were not merely decorations, they were powerful charms, believed to keep evil spirits at bay and to protect the family from harm during the long, cold winter months. The Yule Goat's power was not just in its connection to Thor or its mischievous ways, it was in the balance it brought. It reminded the people of the importance of respecting both the light and the dark, the good and the bad, the mischief and the protection. The world of the Vikings was one of constant struggle, where gods and spirits walked among men, where the sun could disappear for months, and where survival itself was a test of will. The Yule Goat, in its many forms, was a symbol of that struggle. It was a creature that could play tricks, but also one that could ensure a good harvest, protect against danger, and bring blessings in the new year. In the sagas, as the Yule Goat wandered from house to house, it was not always seen. It was a shadow that moved through the night, a presence that could be felt but not always touched. Its visit was something to be feared and honored, a reminder of the forces at work in the world, forces that could not be controlled, but could only be respected. And in its visits, it brought the promise of a new beginning, of light returning after the long, dark winter. Thor's goats, too, had their place in the stories. They were symbols of strength, of the raw power of nature, and of the connection between gods and men. When Thor would ride across the sky, his goats would pull him through the storms, and the thunder would crash in the heavens. But the Yule Goat, in its earthly form, was a reminder that while the gods ruled the heavens, it was the earth that gave life. And the Yule Goat was its messenger, reminding the people that no matter how dark the night, no matter how cold the earth, the cycle of life would continue. The sun would return. The Yule Goat's connection to Thor also reflected the relationship between man and nature. The Vikings revered their gods not as distant, untouchable beings, but as forces that lived within the very world around them. The gods were present in the storms, in the sea, in the fields. And the Yule Goat was a reminder of that connection. It was a creature that moved between the worlds, a symbol of both the destructive power and the protective power of nature. In the sagas, the Yule Goat was not just a passive figure, it was an active force. It would move through the land, visiting the homes of those who honored the old ways and punishing those who did not. It was said that when the Yule Goat visited, the air itself would crackle with energy, as if the earth itself was alive with magic. The people would feel it in their bones, a reminder that the old traditions were not to be forgotten. And in the stillness of the winter night, when the Yule Goat's shadow passed over the land, it was said that the very earth would hold its breath. The old ways were alive, and the power of the gods was not just a thing of stories, it was something that walked among them, in the form of the Yule Goat. The flames of the hearth flickered brightly, casting dancing shadows across the rough-hewn walls of the Viking longhouse. The smell of roasted meat, bread baking, and spiced meat filled the air, a warm contrast to the bitter cold that howled outside. Inside, the sounds of laughter and song echoed through the wooden beams, the people coming together to celebrate a time that had been passed down for generations. This was the Yule Festival, a time when the darkness of winter seemed to lose its grip, if only for a moment, and the light returned to the world. Viking society, bound by the harshness of the land and the unforgiving elements, lived with a deep connection to the changing seasons. Life was a constant balance between survival and celebration. The long, cold winters were times of endurance, but also of unity. At Yule, they would come together to mark the rebirth of the sun, to honor the gods, and to celebrate the return of hope. The festival wasn't just about a feast or merrymaking, it was about reaffirming their bond with each other, with the land, and with the forces that shaped their world. Inside the longhouse, families gathered around the warmth of the fire, the only light in a world blanketed in darkness. The walls were adorned with evergreens, sprigs of holly, fir, and ivy, symbols of life that defied the cold. The air was thick with the scent of burning wood, of meat slowly turning on spits, and the sharp tang of mead that flowed freely. The Yule celebration was not only a feast, it was a ritual, a sacred time to connect with the past and the future. Every detail mattered, from the way the meat was carved to the songs sung in honor of the gods. It was said that during these nights, the veil between the living and the spirits grew thin, and those who honored the old ways would be protected in the year ahead. The men, with their rough hands and hardened faces, would prepare the feast, their laughter rising above the crackling fire. They were the protectors, the warriors, but also the keepers of the old traditions. They would drink deep from their mugs, raising them to Thor and the other gods, thanking them for the past year and hoping for blessings in the coming one. The Yule season was a time to remember those who had passed, to honor their sacrifices, and to seek the gods' favor for another year of survival. As they feasted, they spoke of battles fought and victories won, but also of the struggles that lay ahead. The women, too, had their role in the Yule festival. Their hands were busy preparing the feast, weaving the garlands of greens, and making sure every part of the celebration was filled with meaning. They had the power to shape the home, to bind the family together with love and warmth. Their voices would rise in song, their words carrying the prayers to the gods that the harvest would be bountiful, the animals healthy, and the family safe. The women knew the weight of the long winter nights, the cold that could creep into the bones, and the hunger that gnawed at the stomachs of the young and old alike. They made sure there was enough food, enough warmth, enough light. They were the heart of the Yule celebration, their energy breathing life into the dark season. The children, with wide eyes and bright faces, eagerly awaited the Yule feast. It was their time to learn, to grow, to see how the traditions of their ancestors were woven into the fabric of everyday life. They would play games, listen to stories of the gods and heroes, and watch the elders perform the rituals that had been passed down through the ages. Their laughter and joy were the true light of the Yule season. They believed in the magic of the night, that something ancient, something sacred, was happening all around them. They would be told stories of the Yule Goat, the creature that traveled the land, bringing gifts and blessings, but also playing tricks on those who did not honor the traditions. They were taught to respect the forces of nature, to understand that the Yule Goat was not just a figure of myth, but a spirit who watched over them during the darkest months. As the Yule celebrations stretched into the night, the Yule Goat would be at the heart of the festivities. Sometimes it would take the form of a figure dressed in furs and horns, a mischievous spirit who moved through the crowds, playing tricks and demanding respect. At other times, the Yule Goat was represented by a straw effigy, carefully crafted and placed at the center of the home, a symbol of both fertility and protection. The Yule Goat was everywhere, in the stories told, in the games played, and in the rituals performed. It was a figure of magic, a reminder that while winter may be harsh and unforgiving, there was always the possibility of a new beginning, of the return of the sun. The rituals themselves were steeped in meaning. The Yule log, carefully chosen and brought into the home, would be burned throughout the night, the flames representing the light that would return to the world. It was said that the Yule log carried the strength of the earth itself, and that its burning would ensure that the coming year would bring prosperity. The men would offer up a toast to Thor, raising their mugs high to the god of thunder, asking for his protection and strength. The women would offer their prayers to Freya, the goddess of love and fertility, hoping for a bountiful harvest. And the children would sing songs of the gods, their voices rising in a chorus of hope and joy. As the Yule Goat moved through the crowd, it reminded the people that the world was never just black and white. It was full of shades, of light and dark, of mischief and protection. The Yule Goat could be a trickster, yes, but it could also be the one to ensure that the family was safe, that the harvest would come, that the land would be fertile and the animals would thrive. It was a creature of the wild, a spirit that had walked the earth long before the Vikings had built their longhouses and raised their shields. It was a reminder that the forces of nature, though often unpredictable, were always present, always watching, always shaping their lives. The Yule celebration was not just a time to eat and drink, to sing and dance. It was a time to remember, to connect with the past and the future. The Yule Goat was a living, breathing reminder that everything had its place, that light and dark were part of the same cycle, and that every year, no matter how long or harsh the winter, there would always be the hope of a new dawn. The wind howled through the snow-laden forests, the air crisp and biting. Outside, the world was a blanket of ice and shadow, the stars distant and cold. But inside the longhouse, the warmth of the fire beckoned. The heavy wooden doors creaked open to reveal a world alive with light, sound, and the smell of roasted meats. The Yule festival had arrived, a time when the Vikings gathered to celebrate the return of the sun, to honor the gods, and to bask in the warmth of family and tradition. In this frozen land, where winter seemed to stretch forever, the Yule festival was the heartbeat of the year. The men, women, and children knew that this was not just a time for merrymaking, it was a time of survival. The Yule season represented more than just the shortest days of the year. It was the promise of a new beginning, a rebirth of the sun after the long, dark winter. It was a sacred time when the boundaries between the worlds seemed to thin, and the gods themselves walked among the people. The longhouse was the center of Viking life. Inside, it was dark, save for the flickering light of the fire, which threw long shadows across the walls. The smoke from the hearth curled up to the thatched roof, mixing with the scent of roasting meat and freshly baked bread. The men and women sat together at the long tables, their voices a hum of conversation that mingled with the crackling of the fire. The air was thick with warmth, the heat a welcome relief from the biting cold outside. But this warmth was not just physical, it was the warmth of family, of shared history, of unity. The Yule feast was no small affair. The men would return from hunting or the fields, carrying wild boar, deer, or cattle, each piece a symbol of the strength and sacrifice of the community. The women, skilled with their hands, would prepare the food with care, offering up breads, stews, and fruits preserved from the harvest. The children, their faces flushed from the warmth of the fire, would help where they could, watching as their elders worked with reverence. Every part of the meal, every gesture, was a prayer to the gods for protection, for good health, for abundance in the coming year. It was said that what happened at Yule determined the fate of the seasons ahead, so every detail, every offering, was done with intention. But the feast was just the beginning. Once the meal was shared, the men would raise their horns of mead, and the first toast would be made to Thor, the god of thunder, to Freya, the goddess of love and fertility, and to all the gods who watched over the people. The Yule fire would burn long into the night, its flames a reminder that the dark days of winter would soon be behind them. The men would tell stories of battles fought, of gods who walked the earth, of the creatures who roamed the forests and fields. Their voices would rise with the mead, growing louder with each retelling of old tales. The women would sing songs of the gods, their voices soft and sweet, a melody that soothed the hearts of the children as they sat close to the fire. The children, eager and wide-eyed, would sit at the feet of their elders, soaking in every word, every note of song. They would be told of the Yule Goat, the creature who wandered the land during the darkest days of the year, spreading mischief but also bringing blessings. It was said that if you were good, the Yule Goat would bring gifts. If you were bad, it would play tricks on you, leaving behind a lump of coal as a reminder of your misdeeds. The children's eyes would widen in awe, imagining the great, horned creature slipping through the shadows, unseen but always present, watching and waiting. The role of the Yule Goat was one of both mischief and protection. It was said that the Yule Goat moved through the homes, reminding the people that they were watched over by something far greater than themselves. The creature's presence was a promise that no matter how long or dark the winter might be, the light would return. The Yule Goat was often represented by a figure, made of straw and twine, which was placed at the center of the celebration, a reminder of the forces of nature, of the old ways, of the ancient gods. Sometimes, the figure would take the form of a masked person, their face hidden behind a crafted goat's head, dancing through the longhouse, stirring laughter and excitement. But the Yule Goat was not just a symbol of the gods, it was a part of the people's lives, a reminder of the delicate balance between order and chaos. It was a creature that could be both playful and stern, a trickster who demanded respect but also offered protection. Its presence was a call to honor the old ways, to remember that every person, no matter their age or status, had a part to play in the cycle of life. And so, as the fire burned low and the songs began to fade, the Yule Goat would be woven into every conversation, every moment of the festival. Its presence felt even in the quietest of corners. The roles of the men, women, and children were clear at Yule. The men were the protectors, the warriors, the providers who ensured that the feast would be plentiful. The women were the nurturers, the ones who kept the home warm, who fed and cared for the family, and who passed down the knowledge of the gods through song and ritual. The children were the future, their laughter a promise that the traditions would continue, that the old ways would live on in them. Together, they formed a circle of life, each one playing their part in the great dance of the seasons. As the night wore on, the Yule Goat's role was never far from the minds of the people. It was there, in every prayer, every gift, every gesture of kindness. The festival was not just about the passing of the year, it was about reaffirming the connection between the people and the land, between the living and the spirits. The Yule Goat, in all its forms, reminded them that they were not alone, that they were watched over by forces beyond their understanding, forces that had walked the earth long before they had built their longhouses, long before the first stars had been seen in the winter sky. In the longhouse, as the Yule fire crackled and the last of the mead was drunk, the people knew that this night, this moment, was one of sacred importance. The Yule Goat had come, and with it, the promise of light. The cold might grip the land, the darkness might seem endless, but the sun would always return, just as the Yule Goat would always be there to watch over them. And as the night stretched on, the warmth of the fire, the laughter of family, and the stories of the gods would keep the darkness at bay, until the light once again filled the world. The wind swept through the mountains, howling through the dense pine forests, where the air was sharp with the bite of winter. In the quiet of a snow-covered village in Norway, the Yule Goat's presence was felt long before the first flakes of snow fell. It was more than just a figure, more than just a symbol. It was a spirit, a force that traveled from land to land, taking different forms, but always carrying the same promise. No matter where it went, from the frozen fjords of Norway to the rugged peaks of Iceland, the Yule Goat was there, its horns raised high and its eyes full of ancient knowledge. In Norway, the Yule Goat was both feared and loved. To the people of the north, where the nights were long and the snow never seemed to melt, the Yule Goat was a harbinger of both mischief and protection. The goat was said to roam the land in the days leading up to Yule, moving from home to home, watching the people as they prepared for the festival. Some said it would leave small gifts for the good, but others whispered that it could be mischievous, playing tricks on those who had not shown proper respect to the gods or the land. It was said that the Yule Goat would slip into the homes of the villagers at night, sometimes disguised as a shadow, other times as a man with the head of a goat. It would roam the streets, knocking on doors, leaving behind symbols of good fortune or mischief, depending on the hearts of those inside. In the small villages tucked along the fjords, the Yule Goat was celebrated in a more communal way. Often, young men would dress as the Yule Goat, wearing large goat masks made of wood or straw, their bodies hidden beneath heavy cloaks. They would dance and sing through the streets, their presence a sign of both the fertility of the land and the hope for a new year. The Yule Goat's appearance was a symbol that the darkness of winter was passing, and with the coming of the sun, the earth would once again be fertile, the crops would grow, and the animals would thrive. It was said that the goat brought blessings to the homes that welcomed it, ensuring the family would prosper. Across the seas in Sweden, the Yule Goat was no less important. Here, the figure of the Yule Goat had a more playful side, with families crafting their own goats out of straw and placing them near the hearths. These straw goats, often small and intricately made, were symbols of abundance and prosperity. In Sweden, the Yule Goat was a guardian of the home, protecting it from evil spirits during the long, cold nights. It was said that if the family treated the Yule Goat with kindness, it would bring them good luck in the coming year. If they ignored it, however, they risked the wrath of the goat, who would leave behind a prank or trick as punishment for their neglect. In Denmark, the Yule Goat took on a different character. Here, the goat was seen as a messenger of the gods, carrying their blessings from the heavens to the earth. It was during the Yule festival that people would gather in their homes, lighting candles and sharing food, while the Yule Goat moved silently through the streets, ensuring that the blessings of the gods were carried to each home. There were stories of the Yule Goat visiting families with small gifts or tokens, like a bundle of hay for the livestock or a basket of fruit for the family's table. It was a time of sharing and gratitude, of acknowledging the gods' gifts and offering thanks. In Denmark, the Yule Goat's visit was seen as a sign that the year ahead would be filled with both prosperity and peace. Further west, in Iceland, the Yule Goat was known as Jólakaturinn, or the Yule Cat. It was a creature with large, glowing eyes and a sharp, menacing look. The Yule Cat's role in Icelandic tradition was less about gift-giving and more about punishment. It was said that the Yule Cat would roam the land, lurking in the shadows, waiting for those who had not received new clothes for Yule. It was believed that those who wore old, worn clothes would be dragged away by the cat and lost forever. In Iceland, the Yule Goat had a darker, more ominous side, yet it was still connected to the hope and renewal that the Yule season promised. The Yule Cat's presence was a reminder to the people that they must honor the traditions of the past, of respect, of giving, and of preparing for the future. Each of the Nordic lands gave the Yule Goat its own voice, its own form, and its own rituals. In Norway, it was a mischievous spirit that reminded the people of the balance between light and dark, between good and evil. In Sweden, it was a protective figure, welcoming the sun's return and bringing gifts of fertility and abundance. In Denmark, it was a messenger of the gods, carrying their blessings to the homes of the people. And in Iceland, it was a reminder that those who did not heed the call of the season would face consequences. But no matter where it traveled, the Yule Goat was always present. It moved with the winds, across mountains and fjords, through forests and villages, touching the hearts of all who celebrated Yule. The Yule Goat, no matter its form or role, was more than just a myth. It was a part of the land, a part of the people. It was a bridge between the past and the future, a reminder that the cycle of life would continue, that the darkness would always give way to the light. As the people of the Nordic lands gathered around their fires, exchanging stories and feasting on the food they had gathered throughout the year, they knew that the Yule Goat had come, and with it, the promise of renewal, of hope, and of the enduring strength of their traditions. It was the darkest night of the year, the winter solstice, and the wind howled outside, rattling the windows of the small cottage. Inside, the hearth crackled with warmth, its fire dancing like a spirit in the dark. The family gathered, their faces lit by the flickering flames, eyes wide with excitement and a little fear. They had heard the stories of the Yule Goat who roamed the land during these cold nights. A protector to some, a trickster to others, it was said to move through the villages in search of both good and ill. No one knew what to expect, but everyone knew to be on their best behavior. The Yule Goat was watching. This creature, with its mighty horns and sharp gaze, held the balance between good and mischief, protection and punishment. It moved between worlds, straddling the line between the known and the unknown, sometimes as a guardian, other times as a playful spirit. And in the homes of the Vikings, it was felt most keenly during the Yule season. The goat's nature was as unpredictable as the long, dark winters themselves. It could bless a home with abundance, or it could leave behind a trick, a reminder to the people that they were never fully in control. One such tale tells of a village nestled in a remote valley in Norway. It was said that the villagers, having worked hard through the long months, began to slacken in their efforts. As Yule approached, their preparations were half-hearted. They forgot to honor the old customs, the traditions that had seen their ancestors through countless winters. They let the fire burn low, failed to leave offerings for the gods, and neglected to prepare their homes with care. On the night of Yule, when the villagers had gathered to feast and celebrate, the Yule Goat appeared. It wasn't a grand, menacing figure, but a quiet, almost imperceptible presence at first. It moved silently between the tables, its horns low and its eyes bright. At first, no one noticed. But when they did, it was already too late. The goat, with a knowing gleam in its eye, began to play its tricks. Some of the food that had been carefully prepared for the feast vanished without a trace. The mead that had been poured into horns seemed to disappear, as though it had been drained by unseen hands. Laughter echoed through the hall, but it was nervous laughter, the kind that comes when you know you've done something wrong. The goat's tricks were playful, yet they carried a message. The people realized that they had not respected the Yule traditions, had not shown the right amount of reverence. They had taken their blessings for granted. The next morning, as the first light of the new year broke over the village, they worked with renewed effort, making sure to honor the customs of the Yule season and promising never to forget the importance of their connection to the land. But the Yule Goat was not only a figure of mischief, it was also a protector. In another tale, a family living on the edge of a great forest faced a dark winter. The wind howled through the trees, and the snow piled high outside their small cabin. The father, a strong but weary man, had gone hunting days ago and had not yet returned. His wife and children were left in the cold, unsure if he had survived the dangers of the forest. Night after night, they sat by the fire, waiting, praying to the gods for his safe return. But as the days turned into weeks, fear began to seep into their hearts. The mother told stories to her children, of the gods and of the creatures that watched over them. She spoke of the Yule Goat, a spirit of the old world that could keep evil at bay. On the night of the solstice, as the family huddled together, there was a knock at the door. It was a sound like no other, the sound of hooves tapping lightly against the snow. The children gasped, their eyes wide with wonder. When the door creaked open, the Yule Goat stood before them. But this was no ordinary goat. Its eyes gleamed like fire, its great horns curved like the mountains themselves. It stepped inside, its presence filling the room with warmth. The Yule Goat did not speak, but it moved through the cabin, circling the hearth and nodding toward the father's empty chair. The mother, heart racing, whispered a prayer to the gods. The Yule Goat's visit was no trick. It was a sign that help was on the way. And sure enough, the next morning, the father returned, his hunting load heavy but his eyes bright with the strength of the gods. The Yule Goat had protected them, had watched over the family through the darkest days, and now, it was time for the son to return. For the children, the Yule Goat was both a figure of awe and fear. They heard the stories, the whispered tales of the goat's tricks, and sometimes, they couldn't help but wonder if it would come for them too. But they also knew the goat's true nature. It was said that if you were good, if you honored the old ways, the Yule Goat would leave small gifts, bundles of straw for the animals, fresh bread on the doorstep, or even just a promise that the year ahead would bring warmth and abundance. The children would leave offerings of food for the goat, sometimes in the form of freshly baked bread or small pieces of fruit. They would sleep with one ear open, hoping for a sign that the goat had visited, that they had been worthy of its blessings. Yet, the Yule Goat was not always kind. Some children learned this the hard way. In one tale, a mischievous boy, tired of the old traditions and eager for more play, ignored the goat's call for respect. He neglected his chores, teased his siblings, and forgot to leave offerings. On the night of Yule, as the village celebrated, the Yule Goat entered his home. At first, he thought it was just the wind, or perhaps a trick of the light. But soon, the goat's presence became clear. The boy was left with nothing, a cold hearth, an empty plate, and the sharp sting of regret. The Yule Goat's trickery was never cruel, but it always had a purpose. It was a reminder to honor the season, to respect the old ways, and to never take the blessings of the gods for granted. The Yule Goat's dual nature, the protector and the trickster, kept the people on their toes. It was a creature that reminded them of the balance between light and dark, between right and wrong. It was a figure that demanded respect, but also offered forgiveness. In the longhouses and cottages across the Viking lands, the Yule Goat's presence was felt deeply. It moved through the world, balancing between mischief and blessings, its hooves leaving both laughter and lessons in its wake. And as the days began to lengthen, the villagers knew that the Yule Goat had kept its promise, the light had returned, and with it, hope for a new year. On the longest night of the year, when the moon hung high and pale in a sky thick with swirling clouds, the air was heavy with something beyond the usual winter chill. A restless energy filled the forests, the frozen rivers, and the mountain peaks. The wilds of the north held their breath, waiting. Beneath the stars, through the dark trees, came the distant sound of hooves, heavy, urgent, echoing like thunder on the wind. The wild hunt had begun. The people, huddled in their homes, felt the tremor in the ground beneath them, heard the distant echoes, and they knew. The spirits of the dead, led by a god or a mythical figure, were sweeping across the land, chasing the darkness away, bringing with them the cold bite of winter and the promise of renewal. And among them, galloping through the storm, was the Yule Goat. This ancient procession, feared and revered in equal measure, had long been a part of Viking lore, a chaotic parade of hunters, riders, and spirits riding through the night with an unearthly speed. But the Yule Goat was no mere passenger, it was a creature of purpose, one that carried its own burden in the hunt. Whether working with or against the gods, the Yule Goat's presence in the wild hunt added another layer of mystery to the already unsettling event. The wild hunt was not just a procession of the dead, it was a reckoning. Some said it was led by Odin himself, king of the gods, his wolves racing through the night alongside his great horse, Sleipnir. Others believed it was a host of spirits, warriors who had died in battle, riding to battle again in the afterlife. The Yule Goat was a trickster, a spirit of mischief and protection, and its role in this ghostly procession was a thing of legend. In some tales, the Yule Goat was said to lead the charge, its massive horns glowing in the darkness, signaling the approach of the hunters. Its hooves beat the earth, resonating with power as it galloped through the night, carrying with it the old power of the earth, a reminder that winter's grip was tightening. In other stories, the Yule Goat was an unwilling companion to the gods, a creature forced to follow along in the wake of the wild hunt. In this version, it moved through the storm with a certain resignation, as though bound to the hunt for eternity, bound to the fate of the land itself. The symbolism of the wild hunt was deeply intertwined with the rhythms of the earth. It came as a reminder of the power of the gods, the spirits, and the natural world. In the depths of winter, when the earth was cold and barren, the wild hunt was a way to stir the land back into life. The Yule Goat, whether in its role as a protector or a trickster, helped usher in that new energy. Its wildness reminded the people that life was fragile, that the balance between light and dark could tip in an instant. In its hooves, there was power, and in its presence, there was both fear and hope. On these nights of the wild hunt, the air would grow still as the procession passed. People would whisper quiet prayers, their hearts both racing and heavy with the thought that the gods, spirits, and the Yule Goat were passing near. Some would leave offerings on their doorsteps, fresh bread, a warm drink, a handful of herbs, hoping to appease the spirits and secure their protection through the coming winter months. Others would stay silent, closing their doors tightly, afraid to be seen by the riders. For there were those who believed that to be spotted by the wild hunt was to be marked for death. The Yule Goat, for all its association with the wild hunt, was not a purely malevolent force. It had a role to play in this celestial drama, and its presence held both power and purpose. As the procession rode through the darkened land, it brought both fear and blessing. It could sweep through the villages, its presence a sign of change, and yet, it also held the power to protect the people from evil spirits and the harsh winter cold. But the Yule Goat was not a figure to be easily understood. There were those who believed it was a spirit that could only be tamed through respect and ritual. The people would pray to it, leave gifts for it, hoping that it would pass by their homes without mischief. And in some villages, the Yule Goat was said to visit the homes of the faithful, blessing them with good fortune. But there were others who believed the goat could not be trusted, that it would not shy away from tricks or pranks, leaving behind a cold hearth, broken tools, or stolen harvests for those who had not shown enough care. The wild hunt was the turning of the year, the moment when everything changed. It was said that the gods and spirits rode in a fury, charging through the darkness in a race against time. And the Yule Goat, with its wild eyes and powerful legs, raced alongside them, sometimes as a helper, other times as a reminder of the untamed forces that governed the world. As the wild hunt passed through the land, the winds would pick up, swirling around the villages and through the forests. It was said that the sound of the hooves echoed through the trees for hours after the procession had passed, a lingering reminder of its presence. The Yule Goat, wild and free, reminded the people of the power of the earth, the gods, and the balance between life and death. It was a force both of nature and the supernatural, forever tied to the darkness and the coming light. Through all the stories, one thing remained clear: the Yule Goat was not a simple figure. It was not a mere symbol of good fortune or mischief. It was a spirit, a powerful force that moved through the lands during the Yule season, tied to the wild hunt in ways that were both known and unknown. Its presence was a reminder of the forces that shaped the land, a reminder that life could be both fragile and powerful, that the line between light and dark was not always as clear as it seemed. And as the winds howled and the snow fell, the Yule Goat rode through the night, part of the wild hunt, bringing with it both blessings and warnings, a creature of legend who would forever be tied to the deepest mysteries of the land. There was a time when the night before Yule felt thick with anticipation. The air would be crisp, the hearths warm, and the homes filled with the scent of roasted meats and sweet bread. Children sat wide-eyed by the fire, listening to tales of the gods and spirits who roamed the darkened lands. Their minds were filled with the stories of the Yule Goat, that wild and mighty creature who roamed the forests, bringing both mischief and protection. But as the years passed, something changed in the air. The wildness of the goat began to fade, and a new figure began to take its place. The transformation wasn't immediate, but as the Vikings' lands were touched by Christianity, the figures of old were reshaped. The Yule Goat, once a spirit of mischief and power, slowly became something softer, more familiar. It was no longer a creature to be feared or revered in the same way. It was no longer galloping through the snow with horns ablaze, but instead, it began to take on a gentler form, delivering small gifts, a token of good fortune for the children who had behaved well. In the Christianized lands, where the old gods and spirits began to fade into the shadows, the Yule Goat began to take on the form of a new character, one that echoed the figures of Saint Nicholas and other gift-bringers who had come to be associated with Christmas. Over time, the once wild goat became a more passive figure, no longer an active participant in the chaotic Yule celebrations, but rather a silent visitor in the night. It would appear on the eve of Yule, as the village fell quiet and children drifted off to sleep, leaving behind little gifts for those who had been good, just as the Yule traditions had once promised. The mythology of the Yule goat began to blend with the growing Christian traditions of gift-giving. The horns of the goat no longer glowed with the same supernatural energy. It no longer charged through the village, leaving trails of snow and mystery in its wake. Instead, it quietly slipped into the home, leaving gifts of food and small toys, a figure that children would wake up to find, one that had left no trace of its passage except for the presence and a sense of wonder. The transformation of the Yule goat from a wild, unpredictable figure to a more benevolent, gift-bringing presence was not an overnight change. It was as if the old spirit, the embodiment of winter's power and chaos, was softened by time. The once terrifying creature of the woods, who might have been seen as both a protector and a trickster, was now a figure of kindness, a reminder of the warmth of home and the joy of the season. The laughter and mischievous pranks of old began to fade, replaced with the quiet joy of presents left under the tree, wrapped in simple brown paper or fabric, marking the start of the holiday celebrations. The myth of the Yule goat gradually began to merge with the stories of Santa Claus. In the villages of the north, where Christianity had taken a firm hold, people started to see the similarities between the old figures of Yule and the modern-day Santa. Just as St. Nicholas was said to bring gifts to children in secret, the Yule goat began to take on a similar role. The figure who once rode through the night, part of the wild hunt, now crept quietly through the homes, leaving behind treats and treasures as a sign of good fortune for those who had behaved. But there were still traces of the old Yule goat in the way people celebrated. In some places, especially in the more remote parts of the Viking lands, the old traditions held strong, and people would dress up as the Yule goat, donning horns and fur, to bring cheer to the village. The figure was no longer the fearsome creature that it once had been, but it was still a symbol of the spirit of the season, a reminder that the harshness of winter could always be tempered by kindness, warmth, and generosity. It was as if the goat had transformed into a figure of both light and shadow, a reflection of the changing times. In the years that followed, the Yule goat's transformation into a gift-bringer became more widespread, and as Christianity spread further, the old pagan traditions merged with the Christian celebrations of Christmas. The Yule goat was no longer just a mythological figure of the Viking Age. It had become part of the fabric of the holiday season, influencing the way people celebrated the return of the light, the hope of a new year. The connection to the modern-day Santa Claus is undeniable. Both figures are tied to the season of Yule, both bring joy and gifts to children, and both carry with them the ancient echoes of the past. The jolly old man in the red suit, with his sleigh and reindeer, is not far removed from the wild, powerful figure of the Yule goat who once galloped through the snowy landscapes of the north. The bright eyes, the twinkle of mischief, the gift-giving, these are all threads that have woven together over centuries, merging the stories of old with the celebrations of today. Yet, as the years go on, the spirit of the Yule goat remains with us, even if we no longer see its horns glowing in the dark. Its presence lingers in the gifts we give, in the kindness shared, and in the joy of the season. It's the laughter of children waking to find small surprises beneath the tree. It's the warmth of family gathered around the fire, sharing in the simple joys of being together. The Yule goat, though it has softened over time, still carries with it the magic of the winter season, reminding us that in the coldest, darkest months, there is always light, always warmth, always hope. And so, the transformation of the Yule goat from a wild, mysterious spirit to a gift-bringer is a story of change, of adaptation, of the way ancient traditions bend and shift with time. What was once a figure of power and unpredictability became something softer, more familiar. But in the quiet corners of the night, when the first snow falls and the stars flicker in the cold, the Yule goat's magic still lives on, gently reminding us of the ancient ties that bind us to the past and the joy of the season. In the heart of a cold and quiet Viking village, the stillness of winter is broken only by the crackling of the fire. The walls of the longhouse are adorned with intricate carvings, their meanings fading with time but still whispering the stories of an ancient world. Among these carvings, there is one symbol that stands out, a wild, almost fierce figure of a goat, its horns twisted and sharp, its eyes wide with energy. It is a figure of power and mystery, a reminder of the force of nature that the Vikings both feared and revered. This is the Yule Goat, but it is far more than just a creature from myth. It is a living symbol, carved into stone, woven into the fabric of their lives. The Viking world was one of symbols. Every rune, every carving, every shape carried meaning. The Yule Goat was no exception. As archaeologists sift through the dust of ancient tombs and unearth forgotten artifacts, they find these representations, goats depicted in stone, bone, and wood, images carved into the walls of burial mounds, on rune stones, and on artifacts passed down through generations. Each one tells a story, each one leaves a trace of the spirit of Yule that the Vikings so fiercely celebrated. It's in the way the goat is portrayed, majestic, untamed, and strong. Sometimes it stands alone, a solitary figure carved into a stone, its horns reaching out like a challenge to the gods. In other depictions, the Yule Goat is paired with other symbols, often related to the power of the gods themselves. It's not simply an animal. The goat is a reflection of the harshness and beauty of the world the Vikings inhabited. It is the embodiment of both chaos and protection, mischief and power, symbolizing the dual nature of the Yule season. On some rune stones, the Yule Goat is seen pulling a chariot, reminiscent of Thor's two mighty goats, Tangrisnir and Tangjostr, who pulled his chariot through the sky. There's a connection there, something primal in the way the Vikings revered the animals who could carry the gods. The image of the Yule Goat, powerful and unyielding, is more than just decoration. It's a reminder of the strength of the earth, the unrelenting cold of winter, and the return of the sun. The Yule Goat becomes more than an image, it becomes a symbol of renewal, of the circle of life and death that governs all things. Sometimes, the goat is not just a figure of strength, but of trickery. Some carvings show the goat in mid-leap, caught in a moment of mischievous movement, a reminder of the pranks that were woven into the fabric of Yule celebrations. It's in the way the goat's body twists, the way the lines of the carving follow its every movement, as if the goat itself is alive, urging the observer to laugh, to play, to break free from the rigid rules of the world for just a moment. It is a spirit of joy and wildness, the kind of joy that comes only in the dark of winter, when the world seems to stop and the night stretches on forever. As the centuries passed, the Yule Goat's symbolism evolved but remained rooted in its original meaning. In the Viking Age, goats were sacred animals, their presence intertwined with the gods themselves. Thor's goats were more than mere beasts of burden, they were symbols of the gods' power, capable of traversing the skies and carrying the thunder with them. In Viking art, the goat was often portrayed as a companion to the gods, part of the divine tapestry that connected the human world with the world of the gods. In one particular carving, the Yule Goat is depicted standing proudly beside a figure that might be one of the gods, its horns curved in a perfect arc, its muscles tense with power. The image is not just of a goat, but of a creature whose very presence embodies the wild and untamable forces of nature. It's a figure that would have been both feared and admired by the Vikings, a reminder that the forces of nature were never far from their doorsteps. The Yule Goat was both a protector and a harbinger, a reminder that winter was not something to be taken lightly, but also a time of hope, a time when the sun would return. But it wasn't just in the grand, powerful images that the Yule Goat appeared. It could also be found in the smaller, more intimate depictions, on the handles of knives, on the sides of everyday objects, carved into the wood of a bowl or a spoon. These small carvings were a part of daily life, a constant reminder of the spirit of Yule that lingered in the hearts of the people. Even in the humblest of homes, the Yule Goat was present, watching over them, a symbol of the deeper connection between the people and the land, between the living and the dead, between the darkness of winter and the light that would come again. Some of these symbols are more subtle, less dramatic. But in their simplicity, they speak volumes. A small, carved image of a goat can be a wish for protection in the long, dark nights. It can be a prayer to the gods, asking for a good harvest, for safety in the coming year. The Yule Goat, in these smaller representations, is not just a figure of myth, but a personal companion, a spirit that walks with each person, giving them the strength to endure the cold and the darkness. When we look at the artifacts and carvings left behind by the Vikings, we see not just the Yule goat as an animal, but as a symbol, one that encompasses all of life's forces, both the wild and the tame, the feared and the loved. The goats carved into the stones and the runes are more than just art. They are messages, symbols that were meant to be understood, to be passed down through generations, a way of connecting the past with the present. These symbols remind us that the Yule goat was not just a character in the stories of the Vikings, but a living, breathing force that shaped their lives. It was a protector, a trickster, a spirit of the land, and a symbol of the changing seasons. The goats in the Viking art are not simply representations of an animal, they are expressions of the very spirit of Yule, of the forces that governed the world and the hope that each winter would pass and the light would return. They are a testament to the power of nature, to the cycles of life, and to the stories that echo through time, carried on in the art and symbols left behind by those who came before. The wind howled through the narrow streets of a Viking village, carrying with it the scent of snow and pine. The longhouse, once filled with the firelight of ancient rituals, had grown quieter over the years. The sounds of laughter, of revelers celebrating Yule, had started to fade, replaced by whispers of something new, a strange warmth that was unfamiliar yet captivating. In the glow of the new dawn, something was changing. The old ways, once so deeply rooted in the land, were beginning to ebb, like the tide retreating from the shore. The arrival of Christianity in Viking lands was not sudden, nor was it without resistance. The old gods still lingered in the hearts of the people, their power woven into every aspect of their lives. But with each passing year, the signs of a new order became harder to ignore. The bells of Christian churches rang out, the scent of incense replaced the smoke of the Yule fire, and slowly, the ancient stories began to blend with the teachings of a foreign god. It was a quiet transformation, almost imperceptible at first, but it was enough to change the fabric of a culture that had been as wild and untamed as the land itself. The Yule goat, once a fierce protector and playful trickster in the old traditions, found itself in the midst of this change. Its role in the grand celebrations of Yule, its wild and untamable spirit, could no longer fully align with the teachings of the new faith. The wild goat, with its connection to Thor and the forces of nature, had to evolve. The celebrations around it began to change as well, and the Yule goat slowly shifted from a figure of mystery to something more approachable, more familiar, more Christian. The people, caught between two worlds, began to adapt their traditions. The mighty goat that once roamed the skies with Thor was slowly replaced by a gentler figure, one that fit more neatly into the new Christian celebrations of Christmas. In the villages, the Yule goat's mischievous antics and wild spirit began to soften. Instead of threatening pranks, the goat became a bearer of gifts. It was no longer an embodiment of the untamed forces of nature, but rather a jolly companion who would bring warmth and joy to children during the Yule season. The mischievous trickster of the past turned into a gift-bringer, its horns now a symbol of abundance and goodwill rather than wildness and unpredictability. The transformation was not without a sense of loss. There was a quiet mourning for the wild, untamable goat of the old ways, the creature that had been a part of so many tales, so many moments of mischief and celebration. But as the old gods faded from daily life, the people found new ways to incorporate the Yule goat into their evolving world. It was no longer a reminder of a time when the world was ruled by nature's forces, but a more familiar figure, a part of a new, Christianized Yule celebration that brought families together in warmth and joy. The arrival of Christianity also brought with it new customs that were meant to replace the old ones. The focus shifted from the wild, unpredictable spirit of Yule to a more structured celebration. The firelight that once filled the longhouse, casting dancing shadows on the walls, was now replaced by the soft glow of candles in Christian homes. The Yule goat, now tamed, found itself slipping into the role of Santa Claus. No longer was it a figure of wild power and mystery, but a symbol of Christmas cheer, bringing gifts and blessings to children. The horns, once symbols of strength, were now associated with the sleigh bells that jingled in the crisp winter air. The transformation of the Yule goat was not just a cultural shift, it was a reflection of the broader changes sweeping through Viking society. The old ways, so deeply connected to the natural world, began to give way to a new order, one shaped by the stories and beliefs of Christianity. The Yule Goat, once a figure that represented both the dark and light of winter, had become a more passive figure, part of a new tradition that would be passed down for generations. Its role as a mischievous prankster had been replaced with that of a benevolent gift-bringer, a symbol of the holiday spirit, rather than a force of nature. And yet, even in this softened form, the Yule Goat retained something of its former self. The playful spirit, the glimmer of mischief in its eyes, still lingered in the way it would surprise children with gifts, or the way it would appear in stories told around the hearth. It was no longer the wild creature of old, but it still carried within it the echoes of the past, a reminder of a time when the world was ruled by the gods and the forces of nature. The Yule Goat's transformation was a testament to the resilience of tradition, even in the face of change. It had weathered the storm of a new faith, a new way of life, and found a place in the world that had been reshaped by it. But it also served as a reminder that nothing truly disappears. The wild goat of the old world might have been tamed, but its spirit, its connection to the natural world, to the wildness of winter, to the mischief and mystery of the season, still lived on in the hearts of those who celebrated Yule. And even as the world changed, the echoes of its ancient voice could still be heard, faint but ever present, in the stories, the symbols, and the traditions that survived. As the cold winds of winter swept across the land, the flickering warmth of firelight beckoned in the homes of the Vikings. Inside, families gathered together, their voices a soft murmur amid the crackling of the hearth. Outside, the world was a vast, white expanse, a reflection of the quiet stillness that had taken hold of the earth. The Yule season had arrived, and with it came the ancient pull of tradition, traditions that stretched back through the mists of time, to an age when gods roamed the earth and winter's bite was met with feasts, songs, and rituals to honor the forces of nature. But even in the midst of this ancient celebration, something was different this year. The faces around the fire, the voices singing hymns of old, were also echoing words from a new faith. A faith that promised a light for the darkness, a savior who would bring peace to the world. And as the Yule celebrations continued, a quiet transformation took root, one that would forever change the way the Vikings marked the season. It was here, in the gap between the old and the new, that the Yule Goat found itself. Not just as a figure of past traditions, but as a symbol of a merging world, one where the old gods of thunder and mischief stood side by side with the Christian God of peace and salvation. The Yule Goat, once an embodiment of Thor's power, his two goats pulling his chariot across the sky, became something more, something that could straddle both worlds with ease, representing the continuity of traditions from an era long gone, into one that was slowly beginning to shape the future. The Yule Goat wasn't merely a link to the past, but a living symbol of how customs could evolve while still carrying the essence of what had come before. In the homes of the Christianized Vikings, where the celebrations now included prayers and hymns, the Yule Goat became a bridge between the old and the new, embodying both the joy and the reverence of the season. It still brought the gifts, the warmth, the laughter, but now, it also reflected the changing tides of belief, the way the Viking heart was learning to accept a new way while still holding onto what had always been true. The feasts, once dedicated to honoring the gods, were now held in celebration of the birth of Christ. But the echoes of older customs remained. The tables were still piled high with meat, bread, and ale, and the stories flowed just as they had before. The sacrifices, once made to ensure a good harvest or protection from the harsh winter, were now replaced by acts of kindness and charity toward the less fortunate. The Yule Goat, no longer a figure tied to mischief or divine power, was now a part of this new celebration, a figure that brought both gifts and blessings, not just from the gods of old, but from the God of the new faith as well. Gift-giving, a central part of the Yule season, was one of the oldest traditions, and it was not lost in this transition. The Viking families, once giving to the gods to earn favor, now gave to one another, honoring the spirit of generosity and goodwill. The Yule Goat became part of that. It wasn't just an image of a wild, untamable creature anymore, it became a giver of gifts, a symbol of abundance and joy, spreading cheer through the homes of Christianized Vikings. It was as though the goat had found a new role in a world that was transforming around it, a role that still honored its ancient past, but one that also allowed it to be a part of a new story. And yet, Even as the goat's role softened, there were still moments when its wild nature peeked through, like the flicker of an old flame that refused to be extinguished. The Yule Goat was a figure of both light and darkness, joy and mischief. And though the rituals had changed, there was something deeply comforting in knowing that, no matter what, the Yule Goat had survived. It was a reminder that the old ways, while altered, were not gone. It was proof that the past still had a place in the present, that tradition could be reimagined, but never fully erased. The Yule Goat had become more than just a relic of ancient paganism. It had become a symbol of resilience, of survival in a world that was constantly shifting. It stood in the center of a room where the old fires of Yule still burned bright, but where the light of Christianity shone stronger than ever before. The goat, once a symbol of Thor's might, now carried the warmth of new beliefs, the promise of peace, and the joy of gift-giving. It was a creature of both worlds, standing as a testament to the fact that no tradition is ever truly lost, but simply changes with the times. In the homes of the Christianized Vikings, the Yule Goat stood quietly by, as families celebrated both the birth of Christ and the enduring customs that had marked Yule for centuries. The songs of the old gods and the hymns of the new faith blended together in the soft light of the fire, a chorus that spoke of continuity, of family, and of a season that had always been about both honoring the gods and finding joy in the midst of winter's chill. The Yule Goat had transformed, but it had also endured, its wild nature still present in the laughter of children who eagerly awaited gifts, and in the hearts of those who understood that, sometimes, the past and the present could coexist, side by side. In a world that had changed so much, it was a small miracle to know that some traditions never truly left. They simply found new forms, new meanings, and new ways to live on. And in that transformation, the Yule Goat remained, a bridge between the old and the new, a reminder that even in the darkest of winters, the light of tradition would always find a way to shine through. The darkest night of the year held its breath as the Vikings huddled around their hearths. Outside, the earth lay still and frozen, and the stars above seemed distant, cold, and different. But inside, there was a flicker of something more, something brighter. It was the turning point, the moment when the world began to change, when the grip of winter would loosen its hold, if only ever so slightly. The winter solstice had arrived. And with it, the return of the sun. In the days before the solstice, the darkness had seemed endless. The days had grown short, and the nights stretched long, swallowing the land in their silence. Yet, the Vikings understood something that still echoes through the ages. In the depth of winter, there was a promise of renewal. The Yule Goat, ever present during this time, was not just a figure of old tradition, it was part of the ancient cycle of life and death, darkness and light, fertility and harvest. The Yule Goat was a symbol of the sun's rebirth, a creature who roamed the earth to bring warmth and light back to the world. As the sun dipped lower into the sky, the people knew that it wasn't lost forever, it would rise again. And so, they gathered around fires, their faces reflecting the glow, their hearts full of hope. In these quiet, sacred moments, the Yule Goat would appear, not as a mischievous trickster or a gift-bringer, but as a protector, a guide to the return of the light. In the stories of the Vikings, the Yule Goat's connection to the sun was both simple and profound. It was the symbol of life itself, the force that fought back against the darkness, promising a new beginning. The rituals surrounding the Yule Goat were meant to ensure that this cycle would continue, that the sun's return would bring forth prosperity for the year ahead. Families would gather together in their homes, their spirits lifted by the thought of what was to come. The Yule Goat would be honored in various ways, depending on the land, but the essence remained the same. Through the goat, the light was coming back. The celebrations were rich with meaning, their purpose not only to mark the return of the sun, but to ensure the prosperity of the coming year. This was a time for rituals, for offerings, for words of thanks and hope for what would follow. Livestock would be given offerings of food, crops would be blessed, and people would chant prayers to Thor and the other gods to watch over them in the months to come. In many places, the Yule Goat would visit the homes of families, ensuring that each household would be blessed with abundance in the new year. It wasn't always a physical visit, but a presence felt in the air, a whisper of the sun's warmth that reminded everyone of the growing power of life in the earth. The light of the sun was the force that nurtured crops, that revived the land after the cold of winter. In every ritual, in every word spoken, there was the hope that this rebirth of the sun would bring good fortune to the people. The Yule Goat's connection to the sun was not just about warmth. It was about fertility, about the earth being reborn to give life. The soil would once again bear fruit, the fields would turn green, and the harvest would fill the tables of every Viking home. There was a deep, reverential understanding that the sun was not just a celestial body, but a vital part of the earth's ability to provide. Without it, there was no life, no food, no future. And so, they celebrated the sun's return as a divine gift, a promise that the world would continue to turn, that they would continue to thrive. But it wasn't just the earth that needed the sun. The Vikings, too, felt the impact. They knew that the sun's return meant that they could endure the long months ahead. The light would bring strength to their bodies, and the warmth would revive the heart. This was a season of hope, when the darkness would lift just enough to remind them of the possibility of what lay ahead. It was a time for the community to come together and remember that, no matter how long the night seemed, the day would always come. As the sun slowly began to rise again, the people would gather in groups to celebrate, chanting songs of thanks and hope, offering prayers to the gods. The Yule Goat was often at the center of these celebrations, its presence representing the victory of light over dark. The goat, once a herald of mischief, had become something more, something deeply entwined with the cycles of life and death, the changing of seasons, and the promise of renewal. It stood as a reminder that life would continue, that the earth would be reborn, and that they, too, would have the strength to move forward into the new year. The winter solstice was the moment when the world breathed a sigh of relief. It was the turning point, the beginning of the return of the sun. The Yule Goat's place in the rituals around this time was not just as a figure of old myth, but as a symbol of life's continuous cycle. The sun's return, ushered in by the Yule Goat, was a promise that the earth, the people, and their homes would once again be blessed with the light that brought all things to life. In the stillness of the night, as the last vestiges of the solstice darkened the sky, the Yule Goat stood as a bridge between the cold, desolate winter and the coming warmth of spring. It was a time to look ahead to what was to come, to trust that the sun would return, bringing with it the blessings of fertility, harvest, and life itself. And as the first rays of light peeked over the horizon, the Viking people could finally breathe easy, knowing that the darkness had passed and that the new year was ready to begin. The air inside the great hall is thick with the warmth of the fire, crackling and popping, casting long shadows on the walls. The scent of roasting meats fills the air, mixing with the earthy smell of pine boughs and the sweetness of meat flowing freely. Laughter and chatter echo through the hall, rising and falling with the rhythm of the night. This is the heart of the Viking midwinter feast, the Yule celebration, where the darkest nights of winter are chased away by firelight, food, and the stories of old. It is a time for the people to come together, to celebrate the return of the sun and honor their gods, ancestors, and the cycles of life that bind them all. And at the center of it all, there is the Yule Goat, not merely a creature of myth, but a living presence woven into the very fabric of these gatherings. The Yule Goat was not simply a figure on the fringes of the celebration, it was part of the revelry itself, intertwined with the feasts and rituals that marked the rebirth of the sun. The goat symbolized the wildness of nature, the mischief that stirred in the hearts of the people, and the fertility and life that would return with the sun's light. In this time of darkness, the Yule Goat became a bridge between the old world of winter's harshness and the new world of growth and light. At the feast, the Yule Goat would often be invoked through song and storytelling, as the people gathered around the fire to share tales of old, of gods and giants, of light and darkness. The old skalds, poets, and storytellers, their faces illuminated by the flames, would weave the stories of Thor and his goats, Tangrisnir and Tangjastra, pulling his chariot across the sky. These goats were no mere animals, they were symbols of strength, resilience, and the power of the natural world. The Yule Goat in Viking culture was tied to these tales, and the midwinter feast became a living celebration of the return of the light, through the words spoken, the songs sung, and the mead drunk in their honor. But the Yule Goat wasn't just a figure in stories. It was alive in the actions of the people. Men and women, cloaked in furs and wool, would dress as the Yule Goat, donning horns and masks made of wood and straw. These masked figures would dance and prance through the hall, their movements full of wild energy, mimicking the unpredictable nature of the world around them. They would be met with laughter, cheers, and playful shouts from the crowd, as children shrieked with delight and parents watched with warm smiles. The Yule Goat was a symbol of both joy and chaos, a reminder that the world of humans and gods was never without its surprises, its twists and turns. The revelers would take part in games and rituals that evoked the wildness of nature, the unpredictability of life itself. The presence of the Yule Goat in these acts was a reminder that there was both darkness and light, mischief and joy, in the turning of the year. As the feast carried on, the Yule Goat's role would shift and grow, becoming more than just a figure of fun. It represented fertility and prosperity, qualities that were crucial for survival in the harsh Viking lands. Offerings of food would be made to the Yule Goat, gifts of grain, meat, and drink to ensure the bounty of the coming year. These acts were rituals meant to honor the spirits of the land, to invoke their blessing for the harvests to come. The Yule Goat, as a representative of the sun's return, held the power to bring the blessings of the earth to the people. To honor it was to honor the very forces of nature that allowed life to flourish, that kept the wheels of time turning. The table groans under the weight of the food: roast boar, freshly baked bread, vegetables from the last of the winter stores, and bowls filled with mead and ale. Every bite, every sip is a reminder of the earth's bounty, and every piece of bread broken or meat shared is an offering to the forces of life. The Yule Goat, though its form may be mythical, is as real as the fire that crackles in the hearth, as real as the laughter that fills the air. It is the guardian of the feast, the protector of the people, ensuring that they have all they need to survive the long months ahead. But even as the feast continues into the night, there is an undercurrent of something more, something deeper. The Yule Goat also represents the duality of life, the way the earth gives and takes, the way the sun brings warmth and light, but also the way winter must first fall before spring can come. The Yule Goat's presence at the feast isn't just about celebrating the return of the sun, it's also a recognition of the harshness of the world. The goat reminds the people that they are part of something much larger than themselves, that their survival depends on the balance of nature, the shifting of seasons, and the eternal dance of darkness and light. As the evening wears on, the fire burns lower, and the feast slowly comes to an end. But the presence of the Yule Goat lingers, like the warmth from the fire that won't easily fade. It is a reminder that the cycle of life is ongoing, that the land will be reborn, that the sun will rise again. The Yule Goat's role in these midwinter celebrations is not just about the fun and revelry, it is about the deeper connection between the people and the land, the gods and the earth, the past and the future. And so, as the last songs are sung, as the last mead is drunk, the Yule Goat spirit endures, woven into the very fabric of the Viking Yule. It is a symbol of both the joy of the season and the enduring power of nature, a creature that brings life, mischief, and prosperity to the people. The Yule Goat's place in the feast is a reminder that, as long as they continue to honor the old ways, the sun will return, and with it, the promise of new life, new growth, and new hope. The hearth glows softly, flickering in the darkened room, its warmth wrapping around the family as they gather close, drawn by the firelight and the scent of the evening meal. The children, wide-eyed and eager, sit on the rough-hewn wooden floor, their faces illuminated by the dance of flames. Outside, the cold winds of winter howl, but inside, the comfort of family is the only world that matters. In this quiet moment, a story begins to take shape. A tale that has been told for generations, one passed down through the years, stitched into the very fabric of their lives. It's the story of the Yule Goat, and the children listen with rapt attention as their parents begin to weave its myth. The goat, with its wild horns and mischievous eyes, is not just a creature of folklore. To these children, it's real, a force that moves through the stories, bringing life, lessons, and a touch of magic. It is a symbol of the old ways, a reminder of the cycles of life, of the land, and of family itself. The Yule Goat is not just a tale told on cold winter nights, it is a figure that holds the power to bring families closer, to connect the past with the present, and to weave new memories with every telling. As the story unfolds, the Yule Goat is no longer just a distant myth, but a character that feels alive in the room, its spirit felt in every word. The parents speak of the goat's antics, how it roams the land, challenging those it meets with its tricks, testing their courage and wit. They tell of its role in the Yule feast, of how it would dance around the fires, sometimes bringing joy, sometimes stirring mischief, but always making its presence known. And the children listen, fascinated by the Yule Goat's wildness, its unpredictable nature. But there's more to the tale than just its antics. The Yule Goat carries a deeper meaning, one that is about balance, of light and dark, of mischief and kindness, of the constant push and pull of the world around them. In these stories, the Yule Goat is not just a trickster. It is also a protector, a guardian of the home and hearth. The tales speak of the goat's role in ensuring that the family is kept safe during the darkest days of winter, and how it blesses the home with prosperity and good fortune for the year ahead. The children are told how the goat watches over them, keeping the spirits of mischief at bay, yet always leaving room for a little fun. The Yule Goat teaches them that life is a balance, sometimes wild, sometimes calm, but always full of lessons. The stories of the Yule Goat are never just told for entertainment, they carry with them the wisdom of the generations. As the children listen, they begin to understand that the Yule Goat's mischief is a part of life's unpredictability. It teaches them that it's okay to embrace the wildness of the world, to face the unknown with courage and laughter, and to understand that sometimes a little chaos is necessary for growth. The Yule Goat is a figure of fun, but also one of strength and resilience. Its lessons echo in the hearts of the children, carried with them into the next year and beyond. But the Yule Goat's role in the family doesn't stop at just stories. It is a figure that brings the family together, strengthening bonds and creating memories. During the Yule season, the home becomes alive with the energy of the goat. Children might dress up as the Yule Goat, wearing horns fashioned from wood or straw, and dance around the room, imitating its antics. The parents laugh and join in, their joy infectious, as the family becomes one in their celebration of the return of the sun. It is a time when old traditions are honored, when the lessons of the past are brought forward to guide the present, and when the family, united in love and shared history, faces the future together. The Yule Goat also plays a role in the gift-giving traditions. It is said that the Yule Goat, with its mischievous nature, sometimes delivers gifts to children, leaving little surprises by the door or in the corners of the room. These gifts, often simple but meaningful, carry with them the spirit of generosity and care. The goat, in these moments, becomes a symbol of giving, of sharing the abundance of the season with those they love. And for the children, receiving a gift from the Yule Goat is a rite of passage, a moment of wonder and joy that they will carry with them as they grow. As the night stretches on, the family sits together, hands joined, hearts connected by the warmth of the fire and the shared stories. The Yule Goat is more than just a figure in a tale, it is a presence, one that moves through the lives of each family member, creating bonds that tie them to the land, to the past, and to each other. The goat teaches them to laugh, to play, and to face life's challenges with courage. It reminds them that, no matter how dark the world may seem, there is always light ahead. And when the sun rises again, it will bring with it new hope, new opportunities, and the promise of a new year. The children, eyes heavy with sleep but hearts full of the stories, curl up in their beds, the echo of the Yule Goat's wildness still lingering in the air. They dream of its adventures, of its tricks and its lessons, of its mischievous ways and its kind heart. They know that the Yule Goat will always be with them, a part of their family's history, a part of their own journey. And as they drift off to sleep, they can almost hear its hoofbeats in the distance, as it moves through the dark winter night, bringing with it the promise of the sun's return. In the warmth of the family home, amidst the stories, the laughter, and the rituals, the Yule Goat lives on, not just as a myth, but as a powerful figure that shapes the lives of the people who honor it. It is a symbol of the past, of the strength and resilience of their ancestors, but it is also a reminder of the future, of the family, the community, and the bonds that will continue to grow, year after year. The Yule Goat may roam the land, wild and free, but in the hearts of the family, it is forever home. The wind howled through the trees, a mournful sound that carried with it the biting cold of the winter night. Snow blanketed the ground, a thick, frozen silence hanging in the air. But in the distance, a sound could be heard, the soft crunch of hooves in the snow, steady and sure. The Yule Goat was out there, its form barely visible against the white of the winter landscape, its eyes sharp, its senses keen. It was not alone. As the darkness of winter pressed in, the Yule Goat moved through the land, aware of the presence of other spirits that roamed the frozen world. Spirits of frost and shadow, ice giants, and ancient forces that stirred in the deep winter nights. The Yule Goat, wild and untamed, was a figure of both protection and power in the face of these dark entities. There were whispers in the wind. Some spoke of the Yule Goat as a protector, guarding against the spirits of winter who came to test the limits of the world. These spirits were not kind. They were forces of nature, representing the harshness and the darkness of the season. The ice giants, known for their immense size and cold hearts, roamed the frozen world, their steps causing the earth to tremble. They were creatures of pure winter, and where they walked, life seemed to freeze, and hope seemed to wither. They stood as a reminder of the power and danger of winter, a force that no man or woman could truly control. Yet, the Yule Goat was no ordinary figure in the mythology of the land. It was more than just a bringer of gifts and a mischievous trickster. It was said to be a force that stood against these winter spirits, a guardian who helped keep the balance between light and dark. With its wild energy and fierce protection of the hearth, the Yule Goat was seen as a challenge to the cold, a defiant figure that would stand up to the ice giants and the spirits that sought to overwhelm the world with endless winter. Stories of the Yule Goat's battles against the spirits of winter passed from generation to generation. Some spoke of how it would drive back the frost giants, pushing them back into the depths of the icy mountains where they could no longer threaten the land. Others told of how it would lead the families through the darkest nights, when the stars were hidden and the moon was just a sliver in the sky. The Yule Goat, with its hooves striking the snow, was a beacon of hope. As long as it moved through the cold winter nights, the ice giants had no power to rule the land. The Yule Goat's strength was not just in its physical form. It was believed to possess an ancient magic, a force that could call upon the spirits of the earth, the trees, and the sky, to keep the darkness at bay. The spirits of winter could not break the Yule Goat's spirit, for it was tied to the cycles of life and death, to the coming of the sun, to the rebirth of the world that would follow the long, dark winter. In this way, the Yule Goat was more than a mere guardian. It was a symbol of the eternal battle between the cold and the warmth, the light and the dark. And it was said that those who honored the Yule Goat, who invited it into their homes with offerings of food and drink, would be protected from the coldest, most dangerous parts of winter. They would be kept safe from the touch of the ice giants and from the spirits that wandered through the frozen world. But not all spirits were enemies. There were those, in the deep winter nights, who were more elusive. Frost spirits, small and ethereal, would dance in the moonlight, leaving behind trails of sparkling snowflakes. These spirits were playful, but they, too, were bound to the cold, to the frozen lands. The Yule Goat, with its lively nature, could often be seen in their company, chasing after them in the snow, partaking in their light-hearted pranks. In these moments, the Yule Goat seemed almost like a child, carefree and full of energy, pushing back against the weight of the world with a laugh. Yet, even in the playful moments, there was an underlying tension. The spirits of winter, whether mischievous or dangerous, would never stop their movement through the land. They were a reminder of the fleeting nature of warmth, the briefness of the sun's return, and the constant struggle to survive the bitter cold. In this struggle, the Yule Goat stood as a symbol of endurance, not just for the people but for the land itself. One of the most powerful stories told was of the Yule Goat standing against the heart of winter, where the darkest spirits and coldest giants gathered. It was said that on the longest night of the year, when the ice giants tried to claim the world for their own, the Yule Goat would stand tall, hooves planted firmly in the snow, a defiant figure against the night. It would call upon the forces of nature, the trees and the rivers, the rocks and the wind, to fight back the darkness. And though it could not defeat winter itself, it could push it back, just long enough for the sun to return, bringing the promise of warmth, of life, and of renewal. As the cold winds howled and the night deepened, the Yule Goat was never far away. In the distant hills, in the forests, and in the shadows of the hearth, it moved like a guardian spirit, watching over the land and its people. Its presence was a reminder that no matter how fierce the cold, no matter how dark the winter nights, there would always be a force to stand against it. And as long as the Yule Goat roamed the land, the ice giants would never fully hold sway. Winter would come, but so too would the return of the sun, the warmth, and the light. The Yule Goat's connection to these spirits, both dark and light, powerful and playful, was not just a tale of old, but a living myth, one that carried through the ages. It was a story that reminded people of their place in the world, of their connection to the earth and the sky, to the seasons and the elements. And in the quiet of the winter night, as the Yule Goat moved through the snow, the hearts of those who believed in its power beat a little stronger, knowing that the light would return, and with it, the promise of a new year, a new beginning, and the protection of the Yule Goat itself. The crackling fire in the center of the village cast dancing shadows across the snow-covered ground. The air was thick with the scent of roasted meats, pine, and the bitter bite of winter wind. People gathered around the fire, their faces lit by its warm glow, hands clasped around mugs of ale and warm cider. Songs rang out in the cold night, voices raised in joy and celebration. For this was the time of year when the long, dark winter seemed to pause for a moment, and the world stood still, waiting for the return of the light. And at the heart of these celebrations was the Yule Goat, an ancient figure woven into the very fabric of the season. The festivals of the North were not just occasions to pass the time during the long winter months, they were life itself. They were moments when families, villages, and communities came together to honor the old gods, the earth, and the sun, whose return was promised with each passing day. And woven through all of these rituals, like a thread binding the past to the present, was the Yule Goat, a symbol of both the wildness of nature and the warmth of home. In Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and Iceland, the Yule Goat was honored in a variety of ways, its form shifting and changing across regions, but always remaining a central figure. For some, it was a presence in the winter festivals that marked the winter solstice, a time when the Norse believed the sun was reborn. The celebrations were filled with rituals and prayers, offerings made to the gods and spirits of the earth to ensure a prosperous year ahead. But at the heart of these rites, the Yule Goat stood as both a guardian and a bringer of blessings. In the old days, it was not unusual for families to decorate a Yule Goat figure, a large, often straw, effigy, placing it in the center of their home or by the hearth. This was not just a decoration, but a powerful symbol, believed to carry the spirits of the gods and ancestors into the home. Some would tie ribbons or small offerings to its body, in the hopes that their prayers would be heard. The Yule Goat, ever present in the rituals, was thought to carry messages to the gods, and in return, it would ensure that the coming year would bring bounty, health, and protection from the harsh winter ahead. The Norse gods themselves were no strangers to the Yule Goat. Thor, the thunder god, was most famously associated with two mighty goats, Tangrisnir and Tangjastr, who pulled his chariot across the sky. These goats, fierce and untamed, were believed to have a direct connection to the forces of nature, and they were a reminder of the untamable power of winter itself. As Thor rode across the sky, his goats stamped their hooves in the clouds, bringing thunder and rain, ensuring the earth's fertility and balance. But during Yule, when the days were shortest and the nights longest, these goats and their fiery chariot were reminders that winter's harshness would not last forever. The sun would return, just as the goats carried Thor through the storms, and with it, the promise of renewal. In the early days of winter festivals, the Yule Goat's role wasn't just symbolic, it was active. Villages would create great bonfires in the snow, surrounding them with dancing, singing, and the exchange of food and gifts. The Yule Goat would appear as part of these festivities, often portrayed as a masked figure, clothed in skins, with a wild, untamed energy that matched the season's power. Children, wide-eyed and eager, would run to meet the figure, caught up in the thrill of the moment, some fearful, some filled with laughter. The Yule Goat, much like the spirits of winter, was both a force of mystery and excitement, its presence uniting all who partook in the celebrations. In Sweden, the Yule Goat, or Julbok, was a central figure in the Julata, a midnight mass held to honor the birth of the sun. In these rituals, families would gather before the fire, praying for warmth, safety, and the return of the light. The Yule Goat was often seen as a protector of the home, an intermediary between the people and the gods. Sometimes, children would act out stories of the Yule Goat's adventures, making it an integral part of family life during the holidays. The tales of the Yule Goat's bravery, its battles against the frost giants, or its role in spreading joy, helped tie the community to its shared mythological past. And in these moments, the Yule Goat, ever vibrant and full of life, bridged the gap between the human world and the divine. In Denmark, the Yule Goat had a more mischievous side. Known as julenissen in many areas, the Yule Goat was often seen as a trickster, causing mischief during the festivals. The Yule Goat's pranks were harmless, but they served as a reminder that the line between order and chaos, between light and dark, was thin during the winter months. The wild, untamed nature of the goat mirrored the unpredictability of the season itself. In this way, the Yule Goat's antics helped to balance out the darker, more serious elements of the solstice celebrations, adding an element of joy and laughter to the otherwise solemn occasions. In Iceland, the Yule Goat was connected to the larger celebrations of Jól, a festival that honored the rebirth of the sun and the end of the darkest days of the year. During this time, the Yule Goat would be depicted in local plays and performances, often in the form of a towering figure who would enter the community to bless the people. The Icelandic Yule Goat was both a protector and a provider, bringing gifts of good fortune for the year ahead. Some believed that it could bestow luck upon those who honored it, helping them prosper through the harshest months. Much like the Norse gods, the Yule Goat was seen as a figure of great power and influence, one that played an active role in the cycle of life, death, and rebirth that marked the seasons. These festivals, where the Yule Goat was honored, were not just about the promise of gifts or the coming of a new year. They were about continuity, the sense that the old ways, the old gods, and the old stories still had a place in the world. As the harsh winter months pressed on, these celebrations provided the strength to face the cold, to endure the long nights, and to trust that with the return of the sun, the world would be made whole once more. And the Yule Goat, in all its many forms, was there at the heart of these rituals, a bridge between the past and the present, between the gods and the people, between the dark winter and the bright spring that would follow. In every festival, in every tale, and in every heart that beat with hope for the return of the sun, the Yule Goat lived on, an eternal symbol of the strength, joy, and mystery that defined the spirit of the North. In the still of the winter night, when the snow blankets the earth in a hushed silence, the air tingles with a sense of ancient magic. It is the time of the Yule Goat, a figure both wild and mischievous, a spirit that breathes life into the heart of the cold season. In the flickering glow of firelight, old tales are passed down from one generation to the next, tales of a goat that walked the line between protector and trickster, blessing the humble and causing chaos in equal measure. There was once a story, told by grandmothers with a glint in their eye, about a small village far in the north, nestled between the fjords. It was a place where winter held its grip for months, and every year, as the days grew shorter and the sun seemed to hide behind the mountains, the villagers gathered for their Yule feast. The Yule Goat, they believed, would come down from the mountains to visit them, and with him, the promise of a new year. One bitterly cold night, when the stars shone like shards of ice in the sky, a group of children was gathered by the fire. They had been warned that the Yule Goat was near, and they must be on their best behavior. As the tale went, if they were good, the Yule Goat would bring them gifts, a reward for their kindness and respect. But if they were naughty, they might find their stockings filled with straw or, worse, nothing at all. One boy, named Thorvald, was known for his mischief. His laugh was loud, and his heart was quick to play tricks on anyone he could. He had heard the stories of the Yule Goat, and though he was curious, he never quite believed in the old tales. He doubted that such a creature could exist, until one winter night, when his skepticism would be put to the test. Thorvald had been running through the village streets, playing in the snow, when he caught sight of something strange near the edge of the woods, a flicker of movement in the shadows. His heart raced with excitement. He thought it was a bear or a wolf, but as he crept closer, he saw something else entirely. A large, shadowy figure, with glowing eyes and a thick coat of fur, stood in the clearing. The creature turned its head, locking eyes with Thorvald. It was the Yule Goat. The goat, enormous and wild-eyed, seemed to stand taller than any animal Thorvald had ever seen. His breath came out in great, frosty clouds, and the tips of his horns gleamed in the moonlight like silver blades. The creature made no sound, only watched the boy carefully. Thorvald's first instinct was to run, but he stood frozen, captivated by the sight of the mighty beast. Slowly, the Yule Goat began to move forward, its hooves crunching the snow. It circled Thorvald, its eyes never leaving him. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, it lowered its head and nudged him gently with its horn. Thorvald was so surprised that he barely noticed the tiny pouch the Yule Goat had left beside his feet, filled with nuts and apples, sweet and warm despite the bitter cold of the night. As quickly as the goat had appeared, it was gone, disappearing into the shadows as if it had never been there at all. Thorvald stood there for a long time, stunned by what he had just witnessed. He had thought the Yule Goat was nothing but a story, a playful spirit used to keep children in line. But in that moment, he realized that the tales had truth in them. The Yule Goat was real, and its visit had been a gift. But not all the stories of the Yule Goat were as simple as this one. Another tale, shared in hushed tones among the village elders, spoke of a time when the Yule Goat had been far less kind. There was a family who had fallen on hard times, one winter when the crops had failed and food was scarce. They had no Yule feast to offer, no riches to share. The children went to bed hungry, their stomachs aching with emptiness. On the night before Yule, the Yule Goat appeared at their door, just as it had done for many other families. But this time, something was different. The goat seemed angry, its eyes wild with frustration. It had come to punish, not to bless. The family, despite their hunger, had been selfish and greedy in their hearts, caring only for themselves while ignoring the needs of their neighbors. The Yule Goat, knowing their faults, set to work, turning their meager fire into a great blaze, filling their homes with warmth and their hearts with humility. For a time, the goat wreaked havoc, knocking over pots, scattering straw, and tearing through their home in a whirlwind of wild energy. But as the family cowered, expecting to be punished, the Yule Goat paused. It snorted, stamping its hooves on the cold floor before shaking its mighty horns. Then, with one last glance of piercing eyes, the Yule Goat spoke, "Until you learn to share, you will not receive what you need." And with that, the goat disappeared, leaving only the sound of silence in its wake. The family, shaken by the visit, knew that they had been given a warning. In the days that followed, they worked together, sharing what little they had with the village, helping those in need. And when the next Yule season came, the Yule Goat returned, not in anger, but in joy. It brought gifts of plenty, and the family, now full of gratitude and humility, celebrated with their neighbors, understanding at last the true meaning of the season. There were other tales too, each as wild and strange as the next. One spoke of a group of villagers who had lost their way in a terrible snowstorm, only to be guided to safety by the Yule Goat, whose glowing eyes illuminated the path through the darkest of nights. Another tale told of a young woman who, during a Yule feast, had been struck by an illness so fierce that she could barely move. But when the Yule Goat appeared at her bedside, it breathed life into her, giving her strength and health once more. The Yule Goat was both a trickster and a protector, a figure of wild power that danced on the line between mischief and blessing. But no matter the tale, its presence was always felt with a deep sense of reverence, for in the stories of the Yule Goat, there was always a lesson to be learned, a reminder that the winter could be both a time of hardship and a time of great possibility. And so, the stories lived on, passed down from one generation to the next, until the Yule Goat became something more than just a figure of folklore. It became a symbol of the season itself, a reminder that in the darkest times, light would always return, and with it, the promise of hope, joy, and renewal. On a crisp December evening, the streets of Stockholm glow with the twinkling lights of Christmas markets, the air thick with the scent of cinnamon, roasted chestnuts, and mulled wine. Children with wide eyes skip between stalls, their hands grasping for sweet treats, while the voices of carolers float on the winter air. The Christmas season is alive, vibrant with laughter, warmth, and an unspoken promise of joy. And yet, amid all the modern trappings of the holiday, one figure from centuries past still lingers in the corners of tradition, the Yule Goat. As much as Santa Claus has become the face of Christmas for much of the world and the Scandinavian countries, the Yule Goat continues to leave its mark, tracing a direct line back to the ancient winters of the Norsemen. The Yule Goat, once a creature of mystery and mischief, has transformed through the centuries, but its spirit remains embedded in the Christmas celebrations of today. It is a reminder of a time when the earth was colder and the nights longer, but the bond of family, community, and the return of the sun were always worth celebrating. One of the most enduring traditions is the Yule Goat's role in Scandinavian Christmas markets. Picture a bustling square in the heart of Stockholm or Oslo, where the scent of gingerbread mingles with the sharp bite of winter. Amid the twinkling lights and festive decorations, there, standing tall at the center of the market, is a massive straw Yule Goat. Crafted with intricate care, its form is both simple and majestic, a modern homage to the ancient symbol of protection and celebration. This massive goat is not just a decoration, but a living link to a forgotten world, one where people would leave offerings to appease the Yule Goat or even set it aflame in a final ritual to ensure the rebirth of the sun. The Yule Goat's presence at these Christmas markets is a quiet tribute to the pagan origins of Christmas traditions in the Nordic lands. Though the specifics of the rituals may have faded into history, the symbolism remains. People gather around the goat, as if it still holds the power to bless their homes and lives with the coming of the new year. In this modern setting, the Yule Goat stands not as a symbol of mischief, but as one of unity and goodwill, bringing families and communities together in a shared celebration of the season. But the Yule Goat's influence extends far beyond these markets. It can be seen in the very way we approach gift-giving, which has evolved over time from a communal act of sharing to one of personal exchange. In ancient Norse tradition, it was the Yule Goat who delivered gifts, often in the form of food, hay for livestock, or simple tokens meant to bless the home. The idea of the Yule Goat as a gift-bringer, though overshadowed by Santa Claus, still holds sway in Scandinavian folklore. In Sweden, for example, it's not uncommon for children to be told that the Yule Goat is the one who brings their gifts, especially in rural areas where the connection to these ancient customs feels stronger. Santa Claus, as we know him today, is in many ways a distant relative of the Yule Goat. His jovial laugh, red coat, and sleigh pulled by reindeer are echoes of the same spirit that the Yule Goat embodied centuries ago, one that is generous, playful, and connected to the land and its seasons. As Christianity spread through the Viking lands, many of the old traditions were softened, adapted, or merged with the new faith. The Yule Goat, like many ancient symbols, was transformed into a more palatable figure, one that fit within the Christianized version of Christmas. Over time, the Yule Goat's role was overshadowed by the story of Saint Nicholas, whose gift-giving transformed into the Santa Claus we recognize today. But that transformation was not without its echoes. Santa's sleigh, for example, has clear ties to the ancient Yule Goat's journey through the skies, bringing gifts to both the rich and the poor. The imagery of Santa's reindeer is not so far removed from the mythic animals that were believed to pull the Yule Goat's cart in earlier times, creatures tied to the wild and untamable forces of winter. Even Santa's mischievousness, his ability to enter homes quietly and surprise children with gifts, mirrors the Yule Goat's role as both a harbinger of protection and a trickster, rewarding good behavior while punishing those who were naughty. Yet, while Santa Claus has become the dominant figure of modern Christmas, the Yule Goat has not disappeared completely. Instead, it remains a beloved part of Christmas lore, often seen in the backyards of Scandinavian homes or tucked into the corners of holiday cards and decorations. The Yule Goat, though less talked about in modern times, is a quiet reminder that Christmas, like many traditions, is built on layers of history, on stories and symbols passed down through generations. And while those traditions may have changed, their core remains intact. The Yule Goat's role in modern Scandinavian celebrations is also a reflection of the changing landscape of Christmas itself. The simple rituals of the past, the lighting of candles to ward off the darkness, the communal feasts, and the gathering around the hearth have given way to the commercialized version of the holiday. Yet, the Yule Goat has found its place even in this modern world. It lives on as a figure of warmth and festivity, representing both the darkness of winter and the hope of the sun's return. In modern Christmas gatherings, the goat is still there, not as a dominant figure, but as a subtle presence, a reminder of the past, a link to a time when Christmas was celebrated with a sense of shared purpose and deep connection to the land. At the heart of it all, the Yule Goat has evolved into a symbol of generosity, warmth, and renewal, much like the spirit of Christmas itself. Though the Yule Goat no longer roams the snowy hillsides bringing gifts, its spirit is alive in the laughter of children, in the flicker of candlelight, and in the embrace of family around the dinner table. It may have taken on new forms and been reshaped by the passage of time, but the Yule Goat's legacy, its call to come together, to share, to celebrate, is woven through the fabric of Christmas itself. And in the quiet corners of a modern home, where the Yule Goat's image graces a Christmas decoration, or in the warmth of a firelit room, where stories of old are shared with wide-eyed children, its presence is felt. It is a symbol of continuity, a bridge between the ancient and the modern, the wild and the familiar. A reminder that, no matter how much the world changes, the heart of Christmas remains the same. In the heart of a snow-covered village, as the last vestiges of daylight fade behind the mountains and the long night begins to settle, the Yule Goat's shadow is cast across the cold, hard ground. It stands there, larger than life, crafted from straw and twine, its form almost magical against the glittering winter landscape. It is a symbol of protection, of the passing of time, and the ever-welcome return of the sun. In this quiet corner of Scandinavia, the Yule Goat is not just a relic of forgotten traditions, but a living part of the Christmas celebrations that have been passed down through generations. In contemporary Nordic countries, the Yule Goat is experiencing a quiet, but profound resurgence. Its image, once tucked away in the dusty pages of old folk tales and ancient rituals, is now brought to life once again. Every December, the streets of cities like Stockholm, Oslo, and Helsinki are lit up by festivals that bring the Yule Goat back to the heart of modern Christmas celebrations. These days, it's not just a symbol of winter or the winter solstice, but a representation of the continuity of tradition and the strength of community. The Yule Goat is once again a reminder that, no matter how much the world changes, the past is always there, whispering in the quiet moments between one year and the next. Families gather around the large Yule Goat sculptures, standing proudly in the center of town squares. Children's laughter echoes as they approach the giant, taking pictures and telling stories about the ancient creature that was once said to deliver gifts and watch over their homes. As the years pass, it has become a cherished part of these festivals, gathered around the fire, during the Christmas markets, and in the warm homes where families exchange stories passed down from generation to generation. The Yule Goat's role in modern Yule festivals often has a celebratory feel to it. At Christmas markets, straw versions of the goat appear at every turn, sometimes as elaborate, towering figures, other times as small figurines tucked into the corners of homes. But regardless of its form, its presence brings a sense of connection to the old ways of celebrating. Some festivals feature the Yule Goat Parade, where people dress as the goat, donning straw costumes, making mischief, and playing pranks just as the old folklore described. These parades are not just for entertainment but a way of keeping the tradition alive, of honoring the goat's playful, mischievous side, and its role in community bonding. The heart of the Yule Goat's return is in its role in the home. No longer a creature to be feared, the Yule Goat has become a figure of fun, one that is embraced in a spirit of togetherness. Children eagerly anticipate its appearance as part of the holiday celebrations. Stories are told about how the Yule Goat brings blessings to families, rewards good behavior, and even causes a little chaos for those who are naughty, just as it did in the old myths. This connection to the mythic past brings a sense of comfort to families, a way to reconnect with their roots, while still embracing the joy and warmth of modern Christmas traditions. For many, the Yule Goat has evolved from its ancient roots into a creature that bridges the gap between old and new. In a world where the pace of life is fast and traditions sometimes seem to get lost in the shuffle, the Yule Goat offers a reminder of the simpler things, of community, family, and the cyclical rhythm of the seasons. Its resurgence is part of a larger trend in the Nordic countries, where there is a renewed interest in preserving and celebrating cultural heritage. The Yule Goat has become a symbol not only of Christmas but of the resilience of tradition in a modern world. And yet, there is something more magical at play. The Yule Goat is not confined to just Christmas markets or family celebrations. Its return has also made waves in popular culture, making appearances in movies, television shows, and books. It is not just a relic of the past, but a creature that speaks to the enduring power of storytelling, of legends that never truly fade away. The goat's legacy, steeped in the traditions of the Norse gods and ancient celebrations, has captured the imagination of a new generation, one that is fascinated with the stories of old, the ones that have been passed down like treasured heirlooms. In pop culture, the Yule Goat often appears alongside Santa Claus, sometimes as his mischievous counterpart, other times as a symbol of holiday mischief. It is a playful reminder of how the ancient and the modern intersect. The Yule Goat is no longer confined to the shadowy corners of mythology, but instead stands proudly as a figure of holiday cheer. It is a part of the narrative that celebrates the old ways while allowing them to coexist with contemporary customs. As the Yule Goat continues to evolve in modern times, its meaning shifts too. Where once it may have been a fierce protector of homes, ensuring the return of the sun and the fertility of the land, now it is something more. It's a figure that inspires joy, a symbol of protection, and a reminder that the holiday season is about more than just presents and parties. It's about honoring the cycle of the seasons, the rebirth of the sun, and the ties that bind families and communities together. In a world where everything seems to be in constant flux, the Yule Goat's return to the forefront of Christmas celebrations is a source of joy and connection. Its journey from myth to modernity mirrors our own journey as humans, always adapting, always changing, but never forgetting where we came from. The Yule Goat has found a new place in our hearts, and in doing so, it has become a reminder that tradition, like the seasons, always comes around again. It is, perhaps, more relevant now than ever. As the lights flicker on the Christmas tree and the laughter of loved ones fills the air, the Yule Goat watches silently over us, its presence reminding us of the timelessness of the stories that have shaped who we are, and the joy that comes from celebrating them together. As the long winter night settles in, the quiet streets of Scandinavia glow with the soft light of candles and the hum of 1,000 whispered stories. In the heart of the town square, a towering Yule Goat stands, made of straw and twine, its eyes glistening with the shimmer of ancient memories. The bitter cold is no match for the warmth that seems to rise from the very soul of the land, a warmth born of centuries of tradition, myth, and the unwavering resilience of the people who call this place home. There, standing before the goat, you sense a connection, not just to the present, but to something much older, stretching back through the ages. In modern Scandinavia, the Yule Goat is no longer just a figure of folklore, but a living testament to the strength and continuity of Viking heritage. Its presence is felt in every corner of the winter celebrations, a symbol of endurance, of cultural pride, and of the deep, enduring bond between the people and the land. The Yule Goat story is one of survival, of holding on to what matters even as the world around it changes. It's a reminder that, no matter how many centuries pass, the roots of a culture run deep and continue to nourish future generations. The Yule Goat's place in contemporary Scandinavian life speaks volumes about the resilience of Viking heritage. Though much of the old ways have been obscured by time, the goat still stands as a quiet guardian of tradition. It reminds people of the strength and spirituality woven into the very fabric of their ancestors' lives. Once, the Yule Goat had a role as a protector during the darkest nights of winter, ensuring that the sun would return, and with it, the fertility of the earth. Now, it stands as a symbol of something much larger, a bridge between the past and the present, a figure that embodies the spirit of the ancient Vikings who lived and breathed their beliefs, their gods, and their unwavering sense of community. In many modern Scandinavian homes, the Yule Goat still has its place. During the winter months, small Yule Goat figures can be found on mantels, in windows, and under Christmas trees, a silent witness to the celebration of both the old and the new. The stories of the goat are still told, passed down from parent to child, each retelling an echo of a time long past. But there is more to this resurgence than mere nostalgia. The Yule Goat has become a reminder that culture is not static, it is living and breathing, shaped by the values and experiences of those who honor it. It's a symbol that calls people to remember, to reflect on what has been lost and what has endured. The Yule Goat's continued role in the winter festivities is proof that modern Scandinavia has not forgotten its roots. Though the Viking Age has long since passed, the spirit of that time, the reverence for the land, the gods, and the cycle of the seasons still pulses through the veins of contemporary culture. The festivals, the songs, the celebrations that take place during the darkest months of the year are not just for entertainment, they are acts of cultural preservation. Through these traditions, the Yule Goat lives on, reminding people of their connection to the earth and to one another. In a world where modernity often seeks to push aside the old ways, the Yule Goat remains an act of defiance, a powerful symbol that reminds Scandinavians of the strength found in their cultural heritage. It's as if the goat itself, once a symbol of mischief and protection, is now a protector of the culture itself. By embracing the Yule Goat, Scandinavia is embracing the entirety of its past, the sacred rituals, the long winters, the connections to the gods, and the sense of belonging to something greater than oneself. The Yule Goat has not only survived the passage of time, but has thrived, adapting to the changing world around it. In a society where old customs and beliefs are often overshadowed by the rapid pace of modern life, the goat stands as a reminder that some things are worth holding onto. It is a figure that continues to unite people, bringing them together to share in the ancient rhythms of the seasons, to celebrate the return of the sun, and to honor the strength of their ancestors. There is something deeply moving in the way the Yule Goat is still woven into the fabric of Scandinavian winter celebrations. It's more than just a symbol of a bygone age, it's a living, breathing presence in the lives of the people who celebrate it. From its appearance at Christmas markets to its place in family homes, the Yule Goat is a bridge between what was and what is. Its continued prominence speaks not only to the enduring appeal of ancient stories, but to the resilience of a culture that refuses to be forgotten. In a world that moves so quickly, the Yule Goat is a beacon, a constant reminder that some things endure through the ages, through war, through change, through time itself. As you stand before the Yule Goat during the winter festivals, feeling the cool air and hearing the whispers of the past, you understand. The goat is not just a myth. It is a connection to the land, to the people, and to the ancestors who shaped everything. It's a living thread that ties the present to the past, that whispers the same stories and holds the same values. The Yule Goat may have been born out of the traditions of the Vikings, but it remains a symbol of what it means to be Scandinavian, to live with honor, to cherish the land, and to keep the old ways alive in a modern world. As the first snowflakes of winter fall gently onto the ground, the world seems to pause, holding its breath for something ancient to awaken. The shadows of long-forgotten stories stretch across the land, and in the quiet stillness of the season, a whisper echoes in the wind, a whisper that carries with it the tale of the Yule Goat. It's a story that has lingered for centuries, passed down through generations like a treasured heirloom, woven into the very fabric of the land itself. The Yule Goat has never truly disappeared, it has only slumbered, waiting for the right moment to stir once again. For the Vikings, the Yule Goat was more than just a mythical creature. It was a symbol of resilience, of protection, of the unyielding force of nature that governs the changing seasons. It was a protector of families and communities, ensuring that the dark days of winter would eventually give way to the light of the sun. And as the centuries passed, the Yule Goat's tale evolved, adapting to the changing tides of history, religion, and culture. But at its core, it has remained the same, a living myth, breathing life into every winter celebration, every family gathering, every moment of reflection. Even in the hustle and bustle of modern life, when the world seems to race forward faster than ever before, the Yule Goat continues to leave its mark. It has transformed, yes, from a fierce protector of the Viking hearth to a symbol of holiday cheer and festive spirit. But in the soft twinkle of Christmas lights, in the laughter of children as they make merry, in the warm embrace of family and tradition, the Yule Goat still lingers, its presence felt in the most unexpected of places. You can see its legacy in the Christmas markets of Scandinavia, where straw goats still stand proudly at the center of festivities, a reminder of a time when the very earth seemed to hold its breath beneath the weight of winter's chill. You can hear its voice in the stories told around the fire, where children's eyes widen with wonder as they listen to tales of the Yule Goat's mischievous tricks and protective nature. It is there, in the soft glow of candlelight, and the laughter that fills the air, and the old songs sung with a sense of reverence. The Yule Goat, a living myth, refuses to be lost to the passage of time. It endures because it is more than just a story, it is a part of the collective heartbeat of the North. It embodies the spirit of the Vikings who once faced the harsh winter storms with strength and unity, and the spirit of the generations that have come after them, who still find warmth in the stories and traditions of old. And yet, even as it endures, the Yule Goat remains relevant, adaptable, and ever-evolving. It continues to speak to the changing world, reminding us that some things, like the return of the sun, the strength of community, and the importance of remembering where we come from, are eternal. In a world that sometimes feels disconnected, where the pace of life leaves little room for reflection, the Yule Goat is a call to slow down, to pause, and to honor the cycles that govern our lives. It tells us that even in the darkest of times, there is light on the horizon. It reminds us that change, though inevitable, does not mean the loss of what is most important. As you stand in the quiet of a snow-covered field, the shadows of ancient stories gathering around you, you feel the pull of something timeless. The wind stirs, and for a moment, you could swear you hear the faint rustle of straw, the echo of hooves on the earth. The Yule Goat, in all its forms, protector, trickster, and bringer of light, still walks among us. Its story is far from over. It lives on in the laughter of children, in the warmth of family gatherings, and in the quiet moments of reflection that mark the passing of each season. The tale of the Yule Goat is one that stretches across centuries, from the Viking longhouses to modern Christmas celebrations, yet it remains forever entwined with the spirit of the North. It is a living myth because it speaks to something deep within us, something primal and enduring. It reminds us of our roots, of the bonds we share with one another, and of the hope that always rises with the sun, even after the longest night. In this ever-changing world, where so much is fleeting and uncertain, the Yule Goat stands as a testament to the enduring power of myth, tradition, and heritage. Its tale, like the earth itself, is cyclical, always returning, always evolving, yet always remaining true to its essence. The Yule Goat is not just a figure of the past, it is a living part of our present, and its story will continue to unfold, season after season, generation after generation. The Yule Goat may have started as a simple figure in Viking mythology, but its journey has been long, winding, and full of transformation. From protector to prankster, from an ancient symbol of winter to a figure of modern holiday cheer, the Yule Goat's tale is a living, breathing reminder of the strength found in continuity. As long as there are winter nights and family gatherings, as long as the sun continues to rise after the darkest days, the Yule Goat will remain with us.